Okay, good morning. This is chapter 11 of the 13th edition, and the topic for this chapter in this edition is communication climate. If you're using an earlier edition, you'll notice that that's a change. So this is the 13th edition, chapter 11. So what is communication climate? Well, luckily for you, the book defines that, and essentially it's what's described as social tone. You can think of certain relationships that you have in your life that are very stormy, very tumultuous. There's a lot of dynamics, a lot of changing. It might be changes in volume. Maybe there's a lot of yelling. Maybe it's very quiet. You have relationships that are just very, very tense in the silence. You have some relationships that are really sunny. They're real warm, they're real welcoming. And so the idea of a climate on a relationship is just a metaphor for the social tone within that relationship. Well, how does that develop? A lot of that comes through something called confirming messages and disconfirming messages, and some of the activities that you're doing this week in the learning unit will help you understand the concepts. Confirming messages generally are positive, disconfirming are negative. So there are different levels and different types of confirming and disconfirming messages. Confirming messages can be as simple as recognition. Somebody looks at you across the room and they recognize you and you see that spark in their eyes. Acknowledgement might be just one step further where it's a wave or a nod in their head or a hello. Endorsement means you have their support in something that you say or do. You have a proposal or you make a comment and they sort of back you up. Whether they do that verbally or non-verbally doesn't matter, but that's another form of a confirming message. Disconfirming messages essentially say either you don't matter or you don't exist. So they can be issue-oriented, as argumentative is, and typically this is more focused on the issue itself. Complaining, it's probably one of the most destructive, disconfirming messages that exist, and one that's very easy to fall into. Somebody who just constantly whines, doesn't accomplish very much. It's not very constructive. It's not focused on solution or the problem. It's just basically whining, complaining about the current status quo. Aggressiveness is more of an attack on the person, generally very much motivated by anger and more personal. Other continuing the levels of message confirmation, there's different types of disconfirming messages. Impervious is basically I don't see you, I'm just above you. Interrupting, it's pretty self-explanatory. An irrelevant response, you ask somebody, I don't know, maybe if they can stop by and visit your mom who's sick, and they end up talking about how they're really frustrated with the price of gas lately. So it's completely off topic. Tangential response, it's related to what you're talking about. They start talking about the health of their dog, and it's still related to health, but wait a second, you're asking them to visit your mom because she's sick, and they're bringing up their sick dog. So that's disconfirming. Ambiguous might be, I have a very busy schedule this week. There's a few days that are lighter than others. And you don't know whether that's a commitment to visit your mom or not, so it's a little bit ambiguous. Incongruous is a response that simply is so completely confusing, you have no idea how to take it at all. It's a little bit more specifically defined in the textbook, and to differentiate it from ambiguous. Defensiveness. People get defensive when they feel attacked. And before in the language chapter, we talked about I language and you language. And you language is what tends to trigger defensiveness because people feel attacked. You are always late. And so there's a need, whoa, wait a second. Well, you've been late before too. Or, and so typically defensiveness can lead to a counterattack. And what happens is then you have a defensive spiral where things just begin to escalate. So a climate pattern is basically how that social tone within the relationship can sort of take a life of its own. And much of what's interesting about communication climate is it very reciprocal. One response will often lead one response down a different path. Say toward confirming will more likely trigger a confirming response. A disconfirming comment will more likely trigger a disconfirming response. That's what I mean by reciprocal. So how do you create the positive ones? How do you create an atmosphere that is supportive? And this is both true within your family, within your roommates, within a work environment, within a school environment. How do you create an environment that is cohesive, positive, and supportive? Your book gives you some great strategies to do that. One, and this is where we start to focus on what these are called Gibbs categories of defensiveness. And Jack Gibbs did this research a long time ago. I think it was the 50s. I think 50s or 60s. And his research has pretty much been validated over the decades. Some of the terms are slightly different now, but the concepts are just true. And you can think of these as continuums, okay? So you're somewhere on the continuum. Evaluation versus description, what is that? Evaluation involves a judgment. Description describes what happened. So instead of saying, you are such a slob, you say, your t-shirts are all over the floor. So one is more likely to trigger a defensive response than merely describing. Control versus problem orientation. Control is to impose a solution, it's to mandate, it's to command, it's to dictate. It's very frustrating. Whereas problem orientation is your focus on the situation at hand. And I'll be honest, this is one I can fall into. I can get off the computer. That's control. Versus I have a paper due in an hour and I really need the computer. Do you think that you can get off so I can work? So it's focused on my problem. I've got a deadline in an hour and you're on the only computer in the house. And that's where I need to submit my work. That's my problem versus get off the computer. Sometimes it's easier to say get off the computer, but that's control focus and is more likely going to trigger that defensive response versus if I just explain the scenario. Strategy versus spontaneity. Think of strategy. Strategy is one of those terms that we could we might change the term. Jack Gibbs meant it in the sense of manipulative. So a strategy is basically a message with an ulterior motive, an agenda. It's almost a seeking to trap somebody versus spontaneity is simply being genuine, authentic, and honest. So I could come up to you and say, hey, what are you doing this weekend? And you say nothing. I said, great, I need a babysitter. Okay, that's strategy versus, hey, I need a sitter. I'm trying to find a babysitter for Friday night. Are you free? That's much more transparent. Neutrality versus empathy. Neutrality basically means indifferent. Now we think of neutrality as being, you know, neither positive nor negative. And so if you think of cold or indifferent, that's what Jack Gibbs meant by neutrality. So you come home, you talk to your roommate, you say, I am so upset, I bombed my math test. And they say, wow, you win some, lose some. Okay, so that's a neutral response, but it's really cold. It's really indifferent. Empathy is, oh my gosh, that must suck. I know you studied really hard and you must be so disappointed. I'm so sorry that happened. So superiority versus equality, this is condescension. When people are have the superior view, they're a bit patronizing. It's like, oh, one day you'll understand. And equality is you treat people as equals. I certainly remember my days being single, and I express my crazy schedule, and then when you're married, you'll really understand what it is to be busy. And then when I was married, it was like, when you have kids, you'll really understand what it's, you know, so it's a bit condescending versus equality, you know, oh my gosh, yeah, I'm really struggling with time too, so I can identify the fact that you feel really stressed. Certainty versus provisionalism. Certainty is when you express things from a very dogmatic point of view. You're absolutely sure it is this way. The Lakers will lose, period, versus, well, the Lakers will probably lose if they continue to play the way that they're playing, or something along those lines. So certainty is an opinion statement phrased as fact. So invitational communication, what is that? Invitational communication is communication that is welcoming, that encourages more interaction, and allows for give and take of ideas. It's very positive. So you have suggestions in the textbook of how you can initiate this type of conversation, how you can perpetuate this kind of dialogue, and just keep an open atmosphere without the judgment. Language of choice. This is where you offer alternatives. Your point of view is a valid one, but so is the alternative, so is the other person. And so you allow this free presentation of ideas, and that people have the right to have the opinion that they do. Responding non-defensively to criticism. So what do you do if somebody throws a bunch of disconfirming messages at you? Well, you don't just want to respond in kind, because that will just escalate the spiral. It will get worse. If I have a disgruntled student in my office as department chair and they are here to complain about another professor, one of the first things I can do is simply ask for more information. If I just get them talking, explain to me what happened. Well, and then what happened here, and what does it say in the syllabus, and tell me about other students, and okay, so tell me more about how that inconvenienced you. And so you ask these details. A lot of times somebody who is beginning in an accusatory manner needs only to express themselves, and you can diffuse a situation simply by showing an interest in their point of view. Agreeing with the critic. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean I'm going to agree with every student that comes into my office to complain about somebody else? No. But I can agree that, oh, it must be really frustrating to feel like you're getting really ambiguous guidelines of what the person wants in class. That would be really aggravating. I can understand. I'm really glad that your grades mean so much to you. And so you can agree in certain principle with the critic. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you are agreeing entirely with that person's point of view, that in this scenario I'm giving you, that the professor ought to be fired. So, and lastly, I think, no, that is the last one. Okay, so I've gone a bit long on this, 12 minutes. So that's it for now. I will see you online.